A warm welcome to you and thank you for joining us on the program. I am Fulashade Ogrinde. On Monday, President Buhari signed the Petroleum Industry Bill into law, ending more than a decade of deliberations on the controversial reforms. The Petroleum Industry Act seeks to provide legal, governance, regulatory and fiscal framework for the Nigerian petroleum industry and development of host communities. But most notable of this act is a controversial 3% allocated to host communities and the 30% revenue allocated for the development of frontier inland basins, the total removal of fuel subsidy and other issues on production sharing contract, as well as joint venture obligations. But is the Petroleum Industry Act really the game changer for the industry? Oil and gas expert Mr. Alabode Showmi joins me now to discuss this further. Thank you so much for joining us. What really is the significance of this new Petroleum Industry Act to the development of Nigeria's petroleum industry?
Okay, in simple terms, it means that there will be more jobs for Nigerians. It means there will be greater transparency in the industry. It also means that investment into the industry will sharply increase. To put all of this in perspective so that there's an understanding of what all of this means. The laws that we have been using before the PIA were laws that were from the 1959. Obviously, technology has changed, social interactions have changed since then. While there were some adaptations within the law, but they did not take care of a lot of things. So with the current laws, NNPC as we know it today ceases to exist. There will be a transition into an NNPC Limited, which is a limited liability company. The regulatory powers that NNPC has will now be transferred into two agencies, the authority and the commission. The commission for upstream, the authority for downstream. And basically it means that you can hold a regulator responsible for inefficiencies in the sector. To let you understand, in the power sector, if there's an electrocution today, you will realize that the NEC, which is the Electricity Regulatory Commission, has a process where they set up a panel, where people are interviewed, a report comes out, people are fined, the National Assembly gets a report. But in the oil and gas sector, when there is a gas cylinder explosion, nobody even knows what to do. So now the authority, which will be the regulator for downstream, will be responsible for putting all those kind of things in place. That's why I talk about greater transparency. And of course, there will be more jobs. So in simple terms, if you're going to rate it, that's singularly the most important thing that has happened in this industry in the last 20 years.
Now let's talk about the issue of Frontier Basin and the 3% compensation payments for host communities, which has raised a lot of arguments between stakeholders and the federal government.
Unfortunately, because of the uncertainties and the tribal sensitivities in Nigeria, whenever they talk about the Frontier Basin, the talk is always about the Chad Basin and frontier explorations in Gombe and the rest. But unfortunately, the frontiers are more than that. Frontiers include the Benue-Enugu Basin, which has coal, basically to be exploration for gas, which they have a lot of it. It even extends as far as Kogi. It will also include the Dahomey Basin. As we all know that there's oil in Ogun State, in Ondo State, and in Lagos State. The one in Lagos State has already been exploited, but that basin is called the Dahomey Basin, so that place is also included. There's also a lot of gas in Owerri. There's some gas in the Anambra Basin as well. Those places are also included. So when they're talking about the 30%, We're not just talking about the Chad Basin, it includes all of those places. So that is good to put that in perspective. But having said all of that, the issue is that the 30% that they're talking about is 30% of profit for the NNPC. As of today, the NNPC is a loss-making machine. So that 30% is actually 30% of zero. But the NNPC will not be a loss-making machine forever. So it is when it becomes profitable that you now start talking about the 30% which goes into the frontier basins. That's on one side. Then on the 3% that we're talking about, we are talking about close to 3 times the amount of money that is available to NDDC as of today. So while technically, aesthetically, it does not make a lot of sense for you to say they reduced it from 10% to 3% politically, but in reality, it is still a lot of money. So what we are saying is that 3 times the amount of money available to the NDDC is now going to be made available for host communities for usage. We need to understand that host community funds is different from the frontier funds. The frontier funds is investment into the oil field, but the host community funds is for use in the host community to develop the host community infrastructure or any which way they choose. So there's more money for them. That's in addition to the NDDC. That's in addition to the 13% derivation. And that's in addition to the Ministry of Niger Delta Affairs. So it may not be what they want, but it is significant steps forward. So those are the key things in those areas. In terms of how the bill itself is structured, we are going to see 2 regulatory agencies, the Commission and the Authority. We are going to see the NNPC Limited. And so we are going to have a much better time in Nigeria.
But representatives of host communities have insisted that a 3% cannot do justice to the developmental needs of the communities. What do you make of this?
You know, like I just explained, it's about education. People need to understand the implication of the 3% and know that these things is significant considering where they were coming from. And given the amounts of money that are involved, what the people really need is a judicial use of the money, not more money. Because more money at times can be a problem. It will just mean more corruption. But right now, the amount of money involved needs to be spent in the area in a way that will be profitable to the people. And of course, they are still at liberty to amend the laws to reflect a higher percentage.
Now, the issue or concern is that the pump price of petrol could increase due to deregulation. Are you seeing this happening?
Well, the law has nothing to do with the dynamics of buying and selling. Because the dynamics of buying and selling are trade issues. And the issues of the law are legal. So what people need to realize is that the issues around the premium spirit are related to the current fall in the naira and the corresponding price of crude. So they are totally different things. I think one of the good things about the PIB is that the PIE is that it will allow for greater transparency. Simply because the landing cost is in dollars does not necessarily mean it will be at a higher price. So the first thing that needs to happen is that these figures that they are talking about needs to be x-rayed. So we are not just going to take their words for it. We are going to ask them to provide these figures, and then we will compare it with international prices. I mean, the cost of transportation is international. The cost of vessels is international. The cost of crude is international. The cost of refining is international. So when they bring their own figures, we will calculate the figures for refining, the figures for crude, the figures for transportation, add it up. It's simple mathematics, simple arithmetic, and then we'll compare. So until those figures are available, it will be premature to start saying that there will necessarily be an increase. But for now, we were being given the figures without knowing how they were calculating it, and that was why they will tell us that they've removed subsidy, and a few months down the line they will tell you that it's under recovery, and then you say there's subsidy. So now we need to actually, they need to throw the books open, and then we know where we're going to.
Well, oil and gas experts, Mr. Olabode Shomi, thanks so much for your time.
You're welcome.
We'll take a breather here, and when we return, our focus will be on Nigeria's growing debt profile. Just stay with us.
Corruption not in my country.
Hello? Yeah, I found your wallet in front of a supermarket. Meet me at Apple Junction. Yes, I'll be waiting for you.
Now we find out. Two of us.
Thank you very much, officer. You know, it's surprising that men like you still exist in the police force.
Yes, so...
Oh, yes.
This is just a token of my appreciation.
Oh, no. You don't need to do this. We are only doing our job.
Thank you very much. God bless you.
You're welcome.
Now I know police is really my friend.
Yes.
Friend. Hey. Okay, which came up with this one? I don't understand.
You know your problem. You are greedy. I'm a policeman who is doing his job. All forms of corruption in the force. Not in my country.
Corruption not in my country.
Welcome back. Well, despite widespread doubts, Nigeria's inflation rate has continued to record a decline. For the month of July, the Consumer Price Index, which measures the rate of change in prices of goods and services, moderated for the fourth consecutive time to 17.38% in July from 17.75% in June. But while inflationary pressure is declining marginally, Nigeria's debt profile has continued to rise. As at March 2021, Nigeria's total debt stock stood at 32.9 trillion naira. According to the Debt Management Office, Nigeria's liabilities to the World Bank and the African Development Bank rose from $7.14 billion to $14.35 billion between June 30, 2015 and March 31, 2021. Now, despite these rising numbers, the federal government says falling revenue means Nigeria has to borrow more to fund expenses. But for how long can a country sustain this tempo? Joining me to discuss this further is Faith Yoha, an economist at the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, NESG. Thank you for your time. And now the federal government has continuously defended its appetite to borrow in order to fund expenses. Is borrowing the only solution for Nigeria?
Well, borrowing is not the only solution, but if you look at it, the world is going through a challenging time. Even the accumulation of debt by US is more than what Nigeria have. But the only problem we have is the ability to finance the debt we have and to finance other infrastructural gap that we have. So for me, I think what the government should do is to partner with private sector, right? And also to float non-interest yielding bond. So, for example, when we look at the Sukuk bond, right, it's not interest yielding. So it means the government does not have to finance or service it. All you need to do is to pay back the debt as at when due. So borrowing is not the only solution, but I think is the fastest, is the easiest means for them, especially when it comes to external financing.
Now, to put more context to this current situation, how sustainable are these debts, especially when you consider that the Nigerian government spent a sum of 1.02 trillion naira on domestic and foreign debt service in the fourth quarter of 2021?
When you look at the word sustainability, we have to look at our revenue against servicing and our revenue against GDP. So if you look at our revenue against GDP, well, we are fine because it's at least about 30%. When you look at our revenue, our debt servicing to revenue, you find out that we are spending about 98% of our revenue financing debt or servicing debt. What that means is that the government does not have any other revenue left to finance other activities. So it means the government will continue to borrow. The implication of that is the current debt situation is not sustainable. If we continue at this pace, we are likely to fall into a debt crisis, and which has far-reaching implications for the economy at large. So it could lead to exchange rate crisis, it could lead to another round of recession, it could lead to interest rate hike, and so many other things.
Now, over time, we've seen a consistent weakening of the naira, depleting foreign reserves, and a decline in import investments. Please tell us, how bad is this situation really?
Okay. The major challenge with our foreign reserve is not just the management of exchange rate, is the fact that the forex coming in is low compared to what is needed to manage exchange rate. So, for example, oil price is good, yes, that's one of the major source of forex for the country. But if you look at our trade, export has been really poor. If you look at our foreign capital importation, it has gone down. And most recently, the NIPC has stated that foreign investors' interest in Nigeria has reduced by 80%. So what that means is that we are not getting enough foreign currency into the reserve, and the CBN has continued to deplete the reserve to manage the exchange rate situation. So it's a really bad situation. However, the CBN is doing something about it. Currently, they've said they are not going to release forex to BDC. But what that means, the implication of that is that we expect a further hike in exchange rate, and that will have impact for manufacturing, because majority of manufacturing we do is based on intermediate imports of inputs for our manufacturing sector. So we'll find out that prices will begin to go up. So for exchange rate management, currently there's a lot of challenge, and that dampens investors' confidence and interest in the country.
Now, it's important to know that some industry watchers have criticized government for going above the set debt limits as stipulated by the Fiscal Responsibility Act. What do you make of this?
Yes, the Fiscal Responsibility Act has stipulated the amount of debt to revenue and even debt to GDP. But however, you can see there's so many challenges for the government in terms of revenue generation. So they've been criticized, yes, but we know that these things does not happen in a day, right? They have to start taking steps. They have to start putting structures in place to combat any form of crisis that is looming. Currently, we have seen that using the debt to GDP is not a very good proxy, because Nigeria has a very large economy when it comes to the nominal GDP. But using the debt to revenue, you find out that because revenue has not been growing as much as it should, and expenditure has been rising, you find that debt has also been escalated, because if there's a deficit, a fiscal deficit, it will definitely be financed by borrowing either from central bank or from the public or from external sector. So they've not done well in maintaining, in responding or following the act that has been stated. But I think they are putting structures in place.
Now, all things being equal, how soon do you think Nigeria can repay its debt?
Well, at the moment, if we go by what you just said, all things being equal, we will not be able to repay our debt if we go by all things being equal. But if we go by putting structures in places, policy consistency, monetary, macroeconomic stability, you try to develop the non-oil sector where you can get non-oil revenue. You try to make sure that there are structures in place to help easily and efficiently collect the tax from this sector. You try to diversify the economy. Then in the next few years, if you are able to double revenue as it is now, yes, current revenue, if you can double it, then you'll be able to pay back your debt. Because at the moment, if you're only financing with about 98% of your revenue, then it means there's nothing left to pay part of the debt you're owing, and it means there's little or nothing left to finance other expenditure. So if you're going to continue with the way things are maintaining status quo, it means we're going to accumulate more debt. However, if structures are put in place, engaging in public-private private partnership framework, then in the next 10 years, we should be able to pay our debt and be free from debt. But don't forget that there is also an high habit hypothesis, which says that people just continue borrowing because they are used to borrowing. Yes, you just want to do more. Your finance will not always be enough. You need to borrow because you have a very big appetite for expenditure.
Now, before I let you go, let's touch on inflation rate. For the fourth consecutive time, Nigeria's inflation rate declined. What does this mean for the country?
If you actually look at the numbers, right, inflation declined slightly. It just moved, right? If we know, it just moved from 17.75% to 17.38%. So what that means that price has increased, right? But not as much as the increase we had last month. So there's still an increase in price. Things are still very high. But the rate at which the price increased is not as much as it increased last month. So what that means is that people will continue to struggle to fend for themselves because things are not back to what it used to be, let's say, as at August 2019. These are not how it used to be. As at August 2019, we are doing about 15% inflation, and now we are doing 17% inflation. It means prices have increased by 2 basis points. However, the inflation series is not really a major concern. A major concern is to look at how to rebase the inflation, because currently we are using the 2009 base year, and things has changed, right? We've had a recession, we've seen the digital sector springing up and overtaking activities. So if we do the rebasing to period closer to us, period closer to maybe 2019, 2018, you find out that this inflation, this CPI series will explode, and this inflation series is not the true picture of things.
Well, it's been a pleasant conversation, Faith. Thank you so much for your contributions. And it's a wrap on the program. Join me again next week. Bye for now.